What is the status of being an American company in China right now?
I think the overwhelming feeling that people have is one of uncertainty. It's not so clear that the two sides can come to an agreement. Even if they do come to an agreement, it's not so clear that they could implement it very smoothly. And even if they can implement it smoothly, it's not so clear that there might not be some other actions in the bilateral relationship that would still undermine the business environment for doing business. And so we conducted a survey together with the Shanghai AmCham 2 or 3 weeks ago, and we found that 40% of our companies are either moving some manufacturing outside of China or they're considering doing so. So I think uncertainty and trying to do risk mitigation is very much on people's minds here.
So about 4 out of every 10 companies is looking to get out, either all or in part, of China?
They're looking to do at least some change, yes, so that they aren't as susceptible to things that might continue to unfold in the bilateral relationship that would affect their business.
Did they give any indication, Tim, that if the trade fight is settled, they would change their plans, or are they going to leave anyway?
Well, the problem is, even if we can reach agreement, and of course we hope that they do, we think implementation will still be challenging. You know, the U.S. government has a list about 5 pages long, single-spaced, of items that they think have been agreed between the U.S. and China on economic matters before, where they feel that the Chinese government has not followed through on their commitment. And so even if we get an agreement, there's an underlying sense that implementation could be a problem. And we have other issues in the bilateral relationship that flow into the economic relationship. And the Huawei matter, Huawei being put on the entity list is a great example of that. That puts a lot of uncertainty into supply chains and so on. And there's concern that China has also come up with their own list of unreliable entities, and we don't yet know how that's going to unfold. And it's hard to see how in a short period of time the U.S. and the Chinese governments will develop so much trust and so much understanding on how to deal with these issues that these risks will go away anytime soon.
So what's the takeaway then? What do we do? So we know that a lot of companies are thinking about leaving. They've got a negative impact on their business. They are rightfully frustrated. What do they do if this continues on, if there's no short-term solution, Tim?
Well, I think the business community, our message to both governments is that the bilateral business relationship and the bilateral relationship overall is extremely important to both countries, and we shouldn't resort to quick fixes to try to address the problems that would be relatively clumsy. Instead, both sides should be very thoughtful, and they should find solutions to each side's legitimate concerns that nevertheless create a predictable business environment and allow us to maximize the amount of business that we can still do together. That's very much in the interest of both countries. It's very much interest of the peoples of both countries. And so we're urging both sides to be very thoughtful. The Chinese market is very important to American companies. It's a huge market, and if you don't participate in this market, your global revenues will be significantly reduced. You won't have the revenue base to do cutting-edge R&D that you need to do to stay ahead in your industry, most likely. And Chinese investment can make an important contribution to the U.S. as well. In addition, we think that students going back and forth and other types of cultural exchanges are very important for these two countries to be on the right track. And right now, we're quite concerned that the rhetorical positions that both countries are taking publicly are moving in the wrong direction and won't make settling things so easy. And these are things that can be settled if people are very thoughtful on both sides.
Are we seeing a rise of economic populism? What is the in China, for China policy that your report talks about?
Well, first of all, in China, for China has been an approach that American and other foreign companies have taken for a long time, not just because of nationalism, but you know, I used to work in the auto industry, and automakers like to manufacture and supply their manufacturing base in countries where they do business because they can be more efficient and more responsive to domestic needs. And so a lot of companies, I mean, the Chinese market is big enough that it merits very careful thought from a company of what's the most efficient way to supply that. So a lot of companies have done that, and to the extent that that's your strategy, you're somewhat immune from tariffs and other things that each country may be imposing on each other. But what we're also concerned about now is that if you're sitting in China and you don't really hear a full articulation of what the U.S. interests are, it's very easy for people here to get the feeling that China is simply being targeted by the United States, that the U.S. government's objective is to contain China's technological and economic development. And the U.S. Candidly hasn't done a great job of rebutting that message by articulating a comprehensive strategy that explains what it's doing and at the same time holds out an olive branch for the kinds of things that are very constructive between the two countries.